Hi, hello, and welcome to Glamour, Glitz and Grit. This is the show that is going to explore the lives and styles of old Hollywood, especially the old Hollywood actresses, which I'm a big fan of. Why? Well, I am a trained fashion designer, and what drew me to fashion design was all of the old Hollywood movies with those extraordinary clothes which were sparkling and which were like big and extraordinary. They were different from all the fashions that I saw on the streets. So I was really drawn to that. And my view on fashion was we need to bring that back. And then I realized, well, I'm mostly interested in drawing these fashions and making them poppable and making that kind of lifestyle available and accessible to everyone, because it is a state of mind. It is like being extraordinary. And I just dove into the lives of all those extraordinary personalities. If you start going down that rabbit hole, it is just great. There are so many rich stories. It was a different time in many aspects in old Hollywood. I mean, on the one hand, the industry was quite different, and you hear me talk about that many times. It was the old studio system where the big studios in Hollywood were mostly like normal employers. They employed the actresses like normal employees, and they were assigned to different projects, to different movies. They were given different roles, and they didn't have like the freedom to audition for something or be a freelancer the way the industry is working today and as it has been for the last decades. But back then it was like, okay, we like you, we like the potential, we want to build you up to be a star or be a sidekick to a star. And that is what was happening. And there was like another pace of life and a different pace of stardom. Nowadays, you have like those teens and tweens who are like on YouTube or TikTok, and they're like instantly famous and they have a following, and there is like this need to have a personality and to have a brand like right away. This slow building of a star behind closed doors is not available today anymore. And it was like back then. We didn't have the tabloids in that amount as we have today. There wasn't a mass media. It just started back then, and Hollywood kind of accelerated the development of mass media and the tabloids. And I will share with you the story of my favorite gossipers also on this show. And it was like the mystery around the stars. They were built, they had a private life, and it was like amazing when you got to know something, what was happening behind those closed doors. So there was this orchestration of a star image, of a brand, and they were living very, very, very lively lives, I would call them. They lived them to the fullest, like most of them, and they had interesting ways getting to Hollywood. It wasn't like, oh, I'm done with high school and I'm going to the West Coast and I'm going to become a Hollywood star, as it happens so many times these days. I mean, most parents still like raise their eyebrows. Oh, my kid wants to go to Hollywood and become an actress. It was like that back then because it was frowned upon. It was like compared to be like half naked, because that was what showgirls did back in the days. I mean, there was a time in Hollywood when it was even more skin and innuendos as there is today. I mean, there was the Hays Code implemented back then, which I will talk about many times also, because there was too much nudity, too much skin, too much sex in the movies. And you can't imagine them today because you think, oh, this was the time of my grandparents. There can't be. But there was. I mean, if you look at the pictures of Theda Bara or Paula Negri, which were like in the 20s, I mean, the pictures, they're basically naked, and it was movies, and they were shown in the theaters. So it's a very extraordinary time. It was very experiential. And people tried things. It was very creative. And there was no blockbuster mainstream. It was all about figuring out the medium, figuring out what people liked, figuring out what people could do in front of the camera. And don't forget, there was like the silent film era where people were just like expressing a whole story with their face and mimics and poses. And then it developed into the movies that had like voice. So a lot of actresses who had like not the best screen voices couldn't get work anymore, but others who had like great voices, they were employed. So there's a whole story behind it, and you have to have it in a setting like those huge musical numbers where you have like those geometric dances and like those huge props on stage. It was like a very exciting, very vivacious, very glamorous time. And the word glamorous is thrown around these days, you know, when a fashion magazine is throwing out an issue and this is glamour. But it's like such a toned down version of glamour, because back then it was real glamour. And it was big glamour. And I think it's fascinating. And also, one of the things I'm going to talk about is how many times actors and actors got divorced back then. Nothing compared to today. I mean, it was like totally normal to get like married and divorced like 5 to 7 times. I mean, today, people with 2 divorces are like, oh, she has some issues. Well, back then it was like normal. And so I think they're extraordinary. And in this podcast, I'm going to cover actresses that you might have heard about, actresses that you have never heard about probably. I will talk about Hollywood fashions and the creation of stars. I will talk about the studio system and who the people were behind it. I will talk about the people who established the tabloids and the Hollywood gossip genre. And I will talk about all the fascinating women and men who made Hollywood back then what it was, like the golden era of Hollywood. And I'm very excited to take you on this ride. So thank you for listening, and I can't wait to talk to you next week. Bye.